Business news from the Capital Region. This is Washington Business Report with ABC7 national correspondent Rebecca Cooper.
Thanks for joining us for a fresh look at business and finance and how it impacts you. On this 4th of July weekend, we have a one-on-one interview with the four-star general whose latest book has business lessons from the front lines. Plus, do you have what it takes to be a professional speaker? 3 questions to ask and answer to see if you have what it takes to turn your experience and expertise into big bucks on the speaking circuit. But first, our one-on-one interview with retired General Stan Mcchrystal. It focuses on teamwork and breaking with tradition to get more done. His years as senior commander in Iraq and Afghanistan forced Mcchrystal to learn under fire that many of the old rules of hierarchy and organization need to change for today's new realities. In his new book, Team of Teams, he takes his leadership lessons from the battlefield to the boardroom, teaching businesses how to better take charge and move forward. General Mcchrystal, welcome to Washington Business Report. The book is called Team of Teams. It's your effort to teach the business world some of the strategies you use to be successful in the military world. What does Team of Teams mean?
Well, we grow up in a world where we talk about team. And if you think about it, all of us have been on some kind of a team. And maybe we've been on a really good one where you can finish each other's sentences, where things just happen organically. Well, as organizations scale, you run into the limits. Really, beyond about 100 people, you can't have a team in the small team sense. You can't know everybody. You can't have the same culture and that sort of thing. So what we found is as you scale, what you have to do is create a series of teams, but then you have to connect them in ways that most organizations find very difficult. It's somewhat akin to the relationship between individuals on a great small team. You have to create that same chemistry and that same effective connection between the small teams that together form a big team.
So in your teaching, and you're doing a lot of teaching now in the business world and beyond, you talk a lot about different teams that have been successful, and we'll get to some of them. But the bottom line for you is you say at scale, efficiency and silos can be the fastest way to get something done, but you make the argument again and again for adaptability to be the best way to get something done. Let's take your own experience. You came into Iraq, they were doing, I think, 80 raids a day. You quickly got it up to 300. Take us through the process where you were able to use what you're teaching now.
Yeah, if you think of a military is designed to be as effective as you can be, which went through efficiency. So as you create big armies of young men with guns, you've got to have some kind of order and predictability. You've got to have a chain of command. You've got to have processes to get information. Leaders have got to be able to give a command and expect a certain outcome. Now, that gives you good orderliness, but what it does, it also makes you somewhat slower and more ponderous. And what we found is that was fine for generations. But in today's environment where information moves so quickly and things are so interconnected, we found that our enemy, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, was this constantly moving network of resilient agility. And because of that, our traditional organization, as efficient as it was and designed to be, was way too slow, just wasn't nimble enough, couldn't learn fast enough, and couldn't execute fast enough. When I came in, what we tried to do was use modern technology to speed up our legacy processes. And what we found is that doesn't work. It may make you a little faster, but the basic reality is if information has to start down at the lowest level, find its way up to the C-suite, be thought about, and then direction goes down again. By the time that direction goes down, even if it was brilliant when it was thought at the highest level, it's wrong because the situation's already different. In the military, we have a culture of planning, and you do hugely detailed plans to try to work through a problem. And then we always joke because we say the one thing we're sure we're not going to execute is that plan. We know that the situation's going to change the moment you start the operation. As we say, the enemy gets a vote, and also say no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And so if you're just create this very, very efficient plan that it's somewhat inflexible, you're going to be disappointed. And so what we've really done is built into small teams like the Navy SEALs this organic adaptability. They go into the problem knowing that is going to be a constantly shifting situation, and what they have to do becomes different. But as organizations get big and they want to wire down processes, they want to control things so that they are most efficient, what that does is it can stifle adaptability. And so organizations find, on the one hand, they have an ever-increasing requirement to be adaptable, but their processes can handcuff them.
So let's bring it to today. Let's look at one of the biggest corporate structures out there, the Pentagon. You talk about the building being a symbol for all that's wrong, that it was built, as you say, to be this model of efficiency where everyone could go and get to one another quickly just by the very basic way that the Pentagon is built. And yet you say now, it doesn't matter how quickly you can walk across the building, the doors are locked.
Right.
The information is contained. People are working individually or in small teams. There's none of that sharing that you say is essential, but that's anathema to a lot of the very people that you work with. How do you teach any corporation to get over that idea that they need to hold on to information on a need-to-know basis?
Yeah, there's this idea that, you know, we're only going to give people information to people who have a need to know. The fallacy in that is, who knows who needs to know? So in reality, people can have requirements or have information that you don't know about. So if you have no idea that it exists, how could you know you need to know?
I love that you preach this. I am the type of worker that I respond better if I am made a part of all the different things. If I can see all the moving parts and you tell me what the overall goals are and you let me in on the company secrets, then I'm going to feel more like a part of the team and want to contribute. But that's hard. It's a power thing, and it's an organizational structure where you can't have everybody worrying about everyone else's job. So how do you break down the mindset of people who say it's not going to work? Give me an example of a military leader that you had to reteach how to approach the battlefield.
Well, when we were first operating in Iraq, and the same thing happened in Afghanistan, we were doing special operations raids against high-value targets or individual leaders of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And we would identify someone, and he'd be in a town or a neighborhood somewhere, and we would go in, and the coordination we did with the local forces, U.S. conventional forces, intelligence and whatnot, would be pretty limited. We'd basically tell them, we're coming, stay out of the way, and we would go, and we might capture, might kill the individual, might have a firefight in the area and come out, and we had done our job. We had checked the block. We were successful. But we might have left the situation far worse. We might have had a firefight in which the people in the neighborhood were now against the United States because of the effect. We, in a vacuum, identified our mission, our requirement. We didn't take the larger view of the fight. And so as a consequence, we can actually be working in cross purposes. And the opposite would occur with other organizations. So if you don't have shared consciousness, this contextual understanding of the larger whole, what you do can appear to make sense. Now, you can't tell everybody operational intelligence beforehand, but you can get everybody a sense. What we did is we started bringing liaisons into our headquarters, which previously would have never let outsiders in. We shared everything so that we could have a coordinated effort.
When we come back, more with General Stanley Mcchrystal. He tells us how to fail without being a failure. Stay with us. Welcome back. In part 2 of our interview with 4-star General Stan Mcchrystal, he tells us how to fail up in the business world. Let's talk about some of the things you teach about leadership, because it really struck me that one of your lessons on leadership is you say leaders can let you fail and yet not let you believe you're a failure. And you say you learned that early on when you were a young soldier, you were in training, and there were some things that you weren't good at and that you failed at, and you had a commander who built you back up again. That struck me because the civilian side sees the military, at least in the movies, as the commanders beating you down and making sure you do feel like a failure to build you back up again. Talk about that experience and how you try and use that now when you teach leadership.
Yeah, it's not uncommon in the military, but my personal experience was I was a company commander, had about 120 soldiers, armored vehicles, and we were doing a big training exercise out of Fort Irwin, California. And we had done a dawn attack where you prepare all night, and right at dawn your tanks and armored vehicles cross the line of departure, and probably within 10 minutes of crossing, as soon as we got near the enemy, my company was essentially wiped out. I mean, just boom. And it was my fault. I maneuvered them poorly and whatnot, and so I just felt terrible. And we went into this after-action review after, and they show that the controllers show what had happened. And I walked out of that just humiliated and felt like I'd let my boss down. And so I went to him to kind of say mea culpa. And he could be a hard guy too, but he goes, "I thought you did great." And he knew I didn't do great. I knew he knew I didn't do great. But the whole point was, you're going to fail. All of us are going to fail. We fail a lot more than we're probably willing to admit to ourselves. And we certainly fail more than we're willing to admit to other people. But we know it, and people know it. And so the ability, one, to allow people to fail and learn from it, and also to allow people to fail and just be resilient from it. Because if all of us go home and sob quietly to ourselves every time we fail, we're never going to get anything done.
So your experience is being tapped on all over the world. You're being taken to England, and Harvard Business School is having you teach. So let's do some lightning rounds, because we're going to try and get our MBA in a few short minutes, because your time is short. Let me ask you a few quick ideas and just give me the 5-10-second response. Prioritizing time. What do people need to do differently?
They need to actually list their priorities and then track their calendar use. Usually you list your priorities, but when you look at what you spent your time on afterward, you'll find that pop-ups occurred. And so you've got to then delegate down to allow you to actually spend time on what you say is important.
Picking people who truly believe in the mission versus focused on themselves and what they can give to the mission. Why is that important?
Because people have got to be committed to the success of the overall team. If somebody's worried about their batting average and not the score at the end of the game, you got a big problem.
Leaders who now have to deal with people younger than them who know more than them, inversion of expertise, as you call it. What do they need to learn?
They need to learn to allow themselves to be mentored, reverse mentoring, we call it.
That's hard for a CEO.
And it makes you question your relevance to the organization, but it actually works beautifully, and it empowers your younger people. They become more engaged when given that opportunity.
Leaders, you say, aren't good because they're right, they're good because they learn to trust. What does that mean?
Yeah, nowadays having the right answer is illusory because the requirement's changing. No leader is smart enough to deal with the complexity we have in the world, so you're going to have the collective mind of the entire organization do it. You've got to trust the organization to do that.
Learning what you're not good at and being willing to admit it. You admit that you're not good after 8 p.m. and your staff learned that and stopped asking you deep questions after 8 p.m. What else are you not good at that you've had to learn to admit to your team and adapt?
Yeah, I would make snap decisions sometimes. People would bring me information and I would make an assumption or a decision. That's a danger. You've got to put things to protect you against that. I can't assess people well in a short. Some people can do the 5-second read of someone and know whether they're good, bad, or committed or not. I can't do that. And so I've learned I withhold judgment until quite a bit more engagement.
CEO or business leader you admire right now?
Yeah, I admire several. One is Brad Smith at Intuit. I think he's remarkable.
Why? Well,
he is so open-minded. He runs a company that's already really good. But when he sees an idea that can take him from a 95.5 to a 96, he opens his mind. He grabs that part of it that does that. That's really good, because if somebody's doing well, sometimes you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to show any vulnerability. Any good leader, a company that's doing well, that says what got us here isn't going to keep us on this path, is pretty self-aware. And I really admire that, because they say, we're doing well, but guess what? We've got to get better to do better.
Stanley Mcchrystal teaching us all how to do better. Thanks so much for joining us on Washington Business Report.
Rebecca, thank you.